Um, I was asked to present my testimony of coming to Christ before you, and it has proved to be a very hard exercise for me because I had to go back to the past and examine myself and all the failures and yes, successes as well. But it was like coming to terms to where I was before I came to Christ. As far as I can recall, my journey to Christ began over the airwaves of a radio station in Geneva called Radio 74. I used to tune in to that radio station at about 8 o'clock each morning because the BBC World Service was on and I wanted to pick up the news as I was driving to work. But soon after that program, a Christian program began called Focus on the Family by Dr. Dobson. I appreciated the values that were expressed by the presenter and by the speakers. But whenever I heard the word Jesus, I simply pushed it aside and replaced the word God. By way of a background, I was brought up in a Parsi family as a Zoroastrian. My family were religious in the sense that we went to the fire temple on auspicious days and we were taught to pray daily in a language I never understood called the Avesta language. The emphasis was on cleanliness, good thoughts, good words, good deeds. As I think back upon those virtues, I now realize they were only understood in human terms. I believed in God, and the God that the Zoroastrians looked to was called Ahura Mazda. And as long as my good thoughts and good words and good deeds overcame my bad thoughts, bad words and bad deeds, on the day of judgment, I would cross a bridge and move from darkness to light. If I evaluated myself then, I was basically a good person, and that was all that mattered. Coming back to Geneva and meeting the challenge of bringing up a family with 2 boys who always pushed the boundaries, and keeping a happy family was a struggle. My emphasis was on tidiness and order, which Geeta found difficult to meet. She wanted to feel loved and have a level of communication at a deeper level. I could not provide this because untidiness and a lack of order came in the way. Before we were married, Geeta was an air hostess with Air India, and she tasted the good life of traveling abroad and having a good bunch of friends at home. I cannot say she had strict parents who enforced discipline and tidiness. You hear this word again and again. This separate emphasis on our values began to be the root cause of many arguments. While I immersed myself at work, she remained unhappy at home. Life went on with neither of us content with our lives. I had 2 colleagues at work Ram and Deepak, Ram Gidumal and Deepak Baitani, who had converted to Christianity from their Sindhi background. Their lifestyle impressed me. Geeta and I met Ram and Deepak several times, and invariably our discussions would home in to the virtues that I used to listen on Radio 74. What soon became evident to both of us was that our family life and theirs were poles apart. Ours was fraught with arguments and bickering, and theirs was mainly love and understanding. Ram soon got transferred to London, but we kept in touch. Geeta and I continued our lives in disappointment, sometimes pain and anger. We even agreed to see a marriage counselor, but the fundamental problems remained. Now, to exacerbate the problems, Geeta was soon diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and a condition called restless legs. To cut a long story short, she had to be hospitalized, and she was there for 6 weeks. And all of this coincided with us moving into a new home which we had purchased, and I had to handle all of that. I found the daily routine of going to work and then straight to the hospital and then back again for dinner with the boys just too exhausting. Even when Geeta came home, the restless legs was a major problem that prevented her and me from sleeping. She used to pace the floor at night, praying to God over our family. I found it hard to share her burden with all that was going on in my life. Through Ram, we got introduced to a family, a lovely Christian family called the Berthus. Philippe and, can't remember, Wendy Berthu. It turned out they were missionaries in South India and worked on the very same estate where I later went for work. The company that I worked for had bought that estate, tea estate. Occasionally we would meet the Bertus for dinner. He had a special way of narrating a story with deep understanding, but somehow I felt he was talking to me. It was a strange feeling to hear a story about something taking place in South India, where actually he was talking to me. Over dinner one day, I uncharacteristically broke down while he was praying. My journey to Christ was beginning to feel like an ebb and flow. Sometimes I felt drawn near, and sometimes I would pull back. And this went on for years. I can't tell you how many years. One day, all alone at home, Ram from London called Geeta and asked, "How are you getting on?" In a matter of seconds, she broke down and confessed that life was proving to be very difficult. Ram listened patiently and offered to pray for her on the phone. At the end of the prayer, he mentioned that Christ could bring her out of this situation if only she would accept him and invite him into her heart. He assured Geeta that she was not chained to Christ. She could walk away anytime. Gita struggled with the idea of switching her faith and all that it entailed, but the pain was so great that she bent her knee to Christ. That evening when I came home from work, she told me what had happened, and I said to her, well, if you need a crutch, well, that's fine, but please don't influence the boys in all that you're going through. Nothing much changed, except I have to say I noticed a mellowness in the part of Gita. She too had begun to change. You need to know, and I say this, she can be very fiery at times. In a short time, she joined a church called Crossroads, which was across the border in France, Fenay-Voltaire. But then soon thereafter, our two boys, excuse me, wanted to go to church as well. But their motivation was basically that some of their friends were at that church. The Gitas came up with the idea saying, all right, you may, but then only if I agree to it. Now you need to understand, thank you. That Gita was in a dilemma because only a few, maybe a month or two ago, we had our boys initiate into the Zoroastrian faith, and it became a very strange thing that you initiate your children into the Zoroastrian faith, and then in 2 months they start going to church. So that was a huge struggle. Anyway, we agreed to do that, but we also agreed that I would speak to them about my faith, and Gita would speak to them about her faith. I still remember the night that I walked into my children's bedroom, and they were all there, you could see, with very anxious faces, looking forward to my exposition on the Zoroastrian faith. It took me, and I'm exaggerating by saying 3 minutes, it probably took me a minute to regurgitate the words my parents instilled in me about good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And then I found myself repeating that. I had nothing else to say. So I walked out of that room disappointed, feeling that I had nothing else to offer. Months passed by, and I was suddenly, I mean it suddenly, out of the blue, promoted to head the Geneva operations. It was a position that I had not been fully groomed to do. Small wonder then that I felt empty at the top. Instead of feeling elated, I felt lost. Nevertheless, I did the best that I could, but that was not good enough for me. My family life was much the same and needed fixing. To all of you who see Gita as a simple person, you should know she has a very, very cunning side. She can be very deceptive. Each Sunday, before leaving for church, she put on a Christian worship CD and walked out. And she knew I liked that CD. Anyway, listening to the worship highlighted the chasm or the gap between being with God and my situation. One day, while I was making our bed and listening to the CD in the background, I was overwhelmed with a sense of emptiness. And I remember I couldn't stand. I had to lean against the cupboard, and in pain, I actually called out, God, I need you in my life. Help me. I cannot recall whether I shared this with Geeta. Anyway, Geeta continued going to church, and through church she met an individual called Bruno Delacave, and who was a professional like me. He was with Arthur Young or some company like that. She introduced me to Bruno one day, and not surprisingly, he called me at office and asked me out for lunch. I accepted it, but I had a sense that something was coming. Anyway, over lunch he spoke about the Alpha course which he and his wife Liz Delacave were hosting. And he asked whether I would like to join that course. And I said to him, I am happy where I am, which was not a fact at all. And I don't need a crutch. But my misgivings gave away, and I accepted Bruno's invitation. I was very vocal in my questions about Christ, and I engaged very forcefully with the rest of the group. This carried on till one day, out of the blue, we were asked whether at the end of the course we would like to accept Christ and to have someone pray over us. I still remember this. Bruno Delacave standing here, and a friend that we had, who we got to know later, John Clements, standing here behind me. And John Clements made a remark which said, the very ground that you are standing on is transitory and may well crumble away from beneath your feet. And I looked upon the ground as something permanent. Anyway, all my objections, for some reason, this is now me not in control anymore, just fell away. And I accepted Christ, not knowing what that entailed. What helped me in my walk with Christ was that I did not just accept the Bible, but I questioned everything that I read. This was painful for those who interacted with me, but I think I challenged them in their own thinking. I've moved a little bit ahead, simply to say that I went to church, but I went to church kicking and shouting and being dragged in. That's how I went to church on a Sunday. But I have to pay special thanks to our pastor, whose name is Gary Edmonds, who now has gone to be with his Lord. We became good friends, and we played tennis regularly. He was patient and wise. One day he asked me whether I would like to be baptized, and I said, no, I'm not ready. But his answer is something that I still remember. He said, that's all right. Just understand, you are somewhere in the stands watching a game take place. Hang in there. One day, you will be part of that game. And that is exactly what happened to me. I can't tell you when that happened. It just happened. While this is my testimony in coming to Christ, I cannot complete this message without mentioning my wife, who has been my rock throughout the tribulations we have both been through. Since coming to India, our health deteriorated dramatically. I was soon diagnosed with an incurable disease called lymphoma. and I had to undergo a series of chemotherapies. It will suffice you to know that at the end of one such therapy, I was sent home by the doctors because there was nothing else they could do. Not only that, but the last treatment damaged my kidneys, and I am now also a chronic kidney patient. Geeta's health also deteriorated quite dramatically to the extent that she could no longer walk. Yet despite this, her faith in God remained resolute. To this day, she is my anchor and a partner, and to quote from the Bible, a help meet for me. And that's Genesis 2 something, 2:18. We recognize our situation and ask that you pray with us that as with Job, God would in His grace and mercy bring us to a place of healing and blessing. This is the last part. You'll recall that I said that I accepted Christ without really knowing what that entailed. To some of you, this might look like a foxhole conversion. That is, a conversion brought about by circumstances, and you just jump into a hole for protection. However, I was determined to know much more about the Bible and the truths expressed. I was not shifting from a shade of grey to another shade of grey. I was shifting from something totally different, and therefore it had to have meaning to me. It was only when I began to study the Bible that I understood its overarching narrative and how the different chapters fitted together. The real shift came when I was asked to lead Bible study to a group that had welcomed me, among which was one Mr. L.T. Jayachandran. I should never have accepted the offer that they gave me, but something in me pushed me forward. I was a novice who presumed he could teach, and that was evident sometimes when I presented my very studied efforts to the group, and in particular to LT. Happily, I was prepared to listen and learn, and to this day, I look upon LT as my mentor. To our Bible study that meets at Anil Singh's flat, unfortunately, we've not been able to go because of our health reasons. I can only acknowledge and give thanks to their steadfast encouragement to study and grow in the knowledge of God's Word. That's my testimony.